Morning, Jane Libbis. Thank you so much for coming onto the Bend Like Bamboo podcast today.
Such a pleasure, gorgeous Amanda. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to see you again. I love your energy and I love what you do, and I can't wait to share your story with the world.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you. It's going to be good.
Love it. Let me introduce you properly. So, Jane is a compassionate family lawyer with qualifications in both law and counselling. She takes a holistic approach to separation, which I love, addressing legal, emotional, and practical aspects. Jane provides a supportive environment where clients feel heard and valued as individuals, which is so important when you go through such an emotional time in your life. The legal aspect's so important, but there is the emotional, and it's often forgotten, which is why I really love this conversation and what you do. Your work focuses on guiding people through separation with clarity and empathy, handling property settlements, children's matters, and the emotional aftermath of relationship breakdowns. Jane collaborates with wellness professionals to support clients' emotional and spiritual needs, helping them rebuild and embrace new beginnings with confidence. Welcome, Jane. I want to know everything.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm really so passionate about, helping people beyond the legal. I think that's so important for a family lawyer.
So how did that start? How did you realize that was important? How did you execute that?
So I guess for me, I've always thought that if I hadn't been a lawyer, I would probably like to have been a psychologist. Although now I sometimes wonder whether maybe I'd prefer to be a kinesiologist, because I love that. I love what you do. But so for me, what's really important for people is, yes, ultimately, of course, you need to have some documents to finalize the practicalities of your separation. But it's your heart that breaks first, right? Or it's your soul that needs some guidance. It's not, let me get a pen out. So for me, what I love is working with clients around that emotional space. And I'm fortunate enough also to have a fabulous team who are good with people, but also fantastic with the paperwork and love it much more than I do. So we've got the minutiae covered as well. But so about 15 years ago, I was a bit torn about whether I wanted to continue to be a lawyer because, there were many aspects of it that I didn't love. And I wanted to find what is it that's going to reinvigorate this for me. So I went and did a grad dip in counselling at Swinburne, which was the best thing I've ever done because it was such a joy. And I just absolutely felt like I took to it like a duck to water. And I now really enjoy being able to offer that additional level of compassion and sensitive listening and reflecting back and that kind of deeper connection with clients.
Isn't it interesting how, obviously your original calling was law and studying it. And then you say duck to water with, counseling, studying counseling, a whole different, career and division, but how they blend so well together. How when you've really found your calling, and your calling is integrating the legal aspect into the emotional with the counseling. And were there moments before you studied the counseling where you're like, oh, what am I doing? Is this really right?
Oh God, so many moments, like including way back in first year law when I was like, what am I doing here? But I always had been like a very kind of, this is the path I'm on, so I'll stick with it kind of person. And so really I had years of moments where I knew I liked the connection with clients, but a lot of the real kind of lawyer brain stuff is not necessarily so much me, to be honest. Don't not come to me as a lawyer though, because I do know what I'm doing. And as I said, I also have a beautiful team who really love diving into the minutiae of being a lawyer. They love the legislation, they love the case law, they love the detail. They love going through, people's financial disclosure, all of these things which are ultimately essential. But I've really come to realize that there's also value, and you would know this, in the so-called kind of soft skills and being able to be a safe place for somebody to land and go, my life is falling apart. What next? And they need somebody who's going to create a safe space for them to talk about whatever's worrying them. And ultimately, yes, we have to navigate them through the complexities of the legal system, but they're not going to live with a percentage. They're going to live with what does their new life look like. And so I'm really passionate about us helping clients to think about what is the vision for the future beyond being stuck in the quagmire of the legal system.
Exactly. And that's why when you and I grabbed lunch the other day, we used the word conscious agreement for, when you rebuild, you might go into a new relationship and
Yes,
you've learned
absolutely.
lessons. Yeah, like you can create, what's a conscious agreement?
So a conscious agreement for me is the kind of concept, and I feel very Gwyneth Paltrow even using the word conscious, because of course when she separated, she was all about conscious uncoupling, right? Thinking about doing it differently. Well, I see that there's a space for that as well when people are entering into a new relationship, which is a beautiful thing. And often these days, people do that more than once and may have assets that they want to protect, or they've got family who have given them money to buy a house or whatever it may be. And I'm all about really honoring that space of people who are starting to live together and it's the new love, it's the exciting time, but who might want to protect their assets in the event that they do separate, and getting them to really consciously think about what's important for them in the relationship and also what they might want each person's future to look like in the event that they did separate.
Yeah, it's just so sensible, because then you know your exit strategy, and then you can just put that to bed and focus on the positive instead of that uncertainty around,
Yes.
what would happen if, worst case scenario. I mean, we dive into our first relationships with, it's going to be fun, whatever, and we're all romantic. But once you've gone through the grueling process of having to separate assets while you're brokenhearted, which is why I love what you do, you do go, oh, hang on a second, I'm going to make sure I don't have to put myself through how difficult that was. And it's not as
Yes.
difficult if you have all that ironed out. Even just living together in a new de facto relationship, should
Absolutely.
they have a conscious agreement?
Absolutely, they can. Yes. Anybody who is entering into a relationship where you're living together, be it married, de facto, same sex, whatever it is, yes, absolutely. Everybody can and should, I think, have a conscious agreement. And I think it also helps people to consider some of the complexities that might arise in their relationship. Often the act of doing this, and this is why I think it needs to be done sensitively, can really kind of unearth perhaps different views around money, perhaps childhood fears and complexities that they're bringing forward. It might be that somebody's, been brought up with a real lack mentality, and so they feel like they always have to hold on to their money, whereas somebody might have come from a more generous space. And these agreements, when you're entering into a relationship, can really prompt discussions, not only about what might happen if you separate, but also about, hey, how are we going to run our lives together? Because I
Yeah.
think we're so understandably so excited, and there's the romance and there's the passion and there's all of that. But sometimes we don't perhaps pay enough attention to the practicalities or to kind of the fundamental alignment or misalignment of values.
Yeah.
And doing an agreement can really bring that to light.
Yeah. And it leads into those important discussions around, how do we manage money and what are our values around that, and school fees and everything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Retirement,
Yes.
holidays.
Yes. Yes. I
Oh,
actually think that there's a place for, it's definitely for having those conversations. And I think also people, particularly people who are getting married, because that of itself is such a big moment of celebration. And there's so much emphasis that's put on the dress, the bridal party, the venue, all of these things. I think it's also good to take stock about what that means actually for the relationship moving forward, because you're not just planning an event, you're planning a lifetime, and I
yeah.
think it's good for people to stop and reflect on that actually.
Well, technically, when you get married, what changes legally, just in a little briefer of like,
Well, actually, these days, not much. In fact, really, certainly from a family law perspective, I think that it's also a time when you should speak to a wills and estates lawyer about what to do in terms of your estate if you separate. Sorry, yes, if you separate, but also if you die, of course. But from a family law perspective, de facto and married couples are treated the same when they separate now. So really the only thing a marriage does from a family law perspective is create a hurdle and a need to divorce to legally end the marriage if you separate.
Yeah, right. And you're de facto
Everything else.
after 1 or 2 years.
You have to be separated for 1 year. Oh, sorry, de facto.
Yeah.
Yeah. Technically 2 years, but family law is always incredibly grey. So there can still be potential asset claims in less than 2 years in certain circumstances, but strictly the definition of de facto is around 2 years, yes.
Yeah. So why umbrella family law, which is the beautiful name of your business?
Thank you. So umbrella, in part because when we were birthing Umbrella in 2018, was driving along. I can still remember I was driving along beside the cemetery in Carlton, and it was a really wet day and there were lots of people with umbrellas. And I suddenly thought, oh, umbrella, because we at a cheesy level, right? We provide shelter for people who are going through the storm of the act of separation. And also at a more practical level, we like to be an umbrella organization for being able to then refer people to the other support that they need as they're going through separation.
Yeah, that's
and
beautiful.
also we just wanted to be something that's a bit more interesting than Libbis and Smith, you know, and that has a bit more longevity and something that's a bit bigger than just the two of us as business.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Where are you based? You're in South Melbourne.
We're in South Melbourne, but really we always say we're based wherever people need us, Amanda, because of course I think that's one beautiful thing, and I know you do work online as well, that was a great thing to come from lockdown, our crazy lockdown life in Melbourne, is that it's much more acceptable now, I think, for people to feel comfortable doing things on Zoom or by phone. And it's beautiful because it's really opened us up to be able to assist people in far more places, hasn't it? I know that's true for you as well.
100%. I see so many more virtual clients now, which has opened up my demographic to, you know, rural, international, interstate. It's wonderful. And now even group healings. And
yes, it's fabulous. It's fabulous. And I think even just, yes, connecting at a much more deep level and accepting, even like the conversation we're having now, we can get right in there, even though it's online, and we can do the same with our clients, which is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. So anyone listening that might be going through, you know, a separation, and, you know, they're going through that turmoil, that emotional turmoil, what's one piece of advice that you would give them, you know, with your expertise and all your knowledge of what people go through? What's the one or two things that you think they might need to know to help
I
them?
guess, I mean, there's probably 1,000 things, but the ones that spring to mind right now are, number one, don't be scared that seeing a lawyer means you're going into battle. It just means that you're getting yourself some advice about how to work through this next period. I mean, you need to be careful about the lawyer that you might see, but mostly seeing a lawyer is not scary and doesn't suddenly mean you're going to find yourself in court. So don't be afraid to get some knowledge, so that even if you then don't go back to a lawyer for ages, you're negotiating and moving forward from a position of understanding what the options are. So that's step one, don't be afraid of lawyers. And step two is know that it will get better.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because, you know, I've got a picture in my mind always of this gorgeous client of mine who one day came into my office and she just looked so incredibly broken. And now we're still in touch and I see her years later, and she for years now has been absolutely flourishing. And it's that moment of separation, and when you're in the weeds with dealing with, you know, trying to sort out your issues, your finances, and time with your precious children, it feels like it's never going to end. But even in the worst of situations, it does. And at the risk of using a cheesy umbrella metaphor, the sun does shine again, you know, like it does. And you know this from working with people too, Amanda, that it feels like hell, but you do come out the other side. And I think it's important to take that and hold on to that kernel of hope too.
And you want to know that you did everything that you could to show up with dignity and respect for someone that you've loved and that you spent a chunk of your lifetime with, and maybe even have kids with. And you want to look back and go, I ethically and, you know, with my integrity, I showed up to be the best person that I could. You want to feel that, and almost, that's what I call a conscious breakup. And it is totally possible, and it can be very healing for the ending of that relationship too, is how you want to handle that and how you show up. And that's why mediation is wonderful, because it is a space that's not necessarily a battle. It's a space where you guys can safely go, instead of this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, and arguing, you could also start the conversation around, what is it that you need to feel safe in this separation? What is it that you need? And then start drawing it up on the whiteboards. That usually happens in the mediation, and you can hug at the end. You can.
Oh, Amanda, yes, I have to show that snippet of this podcast to my clients, because that's exactly, you know, how I like people to think and feel. And in fact, we had a gorgeous mediator colleague of mine speak to our team just this week about helping people to safely, consciously, and with dignity prepare for mediation. And that understanding around, again, it's not necessarily hanging on to, oh, but we need to make sure that this tiny thing is in the asset pool and we need to go for every percentage. It's really about, let's create a vision for the future. What is it that once we're through this, you want life to look like? And how can we work through dividing things that we've had together so that we can both live in the best possible way moving forward? And there's no doubt that that's always much harder when you're splitting things in whatever percentage, right? I mean, that's the thing about the family law process. For many people, from a kind of character perspective and a soul perspective, sometimes it's a really positive journey for them. But ultimately, you're going to be spending less time with your children and you're going to be having less of what was your money. However you look at it, and even with the best outcome, those two things are inevitable because what was once whole is now being divided. So that's going to be hard. But yes, I think if people can really feel into, and sometimes it's an opportunity to forge a much better new life, even with different arrangements.
Absolutely. And as a kinesiologist, the other advice that I can give is when we're stressed, we usually use more of our intellect than our intuition and gut. And when you can listen with an open heart, more intuitively, you can hear more what the other person needs to feel safe. And if you offer that energetically, then you're going to receive the same back, hopefully, from the other person. And that's where it can become more of a conscious separation.
Yes, and this is where I see a lot of merit in family lawyers and kinesiologists, and in particular, you and me, we're working together to be able to offer people that support, because I think that sometimes people don't expect their lawyers to be the ones that help them to think in that way and to use the beautiful words that you've just used. So to have two people on the team who can be really supporting them, but one that's perhaps dropping much more into the heart space and in the intuition and getting them to be guided in that way, I think it's so valuable, because and often for people, it's the way they've lived or the way that they want to live. So it's nice if it can, as much as possible, also be the way that they separate, even if they might be the only one that's holding the good energy because their partner might be so bound up, so deeply grieving, or so mad, or just a difficult character. But I think it's still helpful, and you would know as well, that one person can sort of work to change the energy, ideally.
Exactly. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, no matter what's happened between you or what that other person has done, what you've done, is you can choose to shift into a new chapter, a new radio station, a frequency of energy, to make a change and to forgive the past and reset completely. And it can lead to a beautiful friendship, particularly if you've got family together. It's in everyone's best interest to develop a new, strong and intimate relationship that's just different. Yeah, just gonna make life easier.
And as you're saying that, I'm sitting here with kind of the words and vibe of some of my clients who are stuck in the trenches, and I can imagine them hearing that, thinking, well, not with my ex, I can't. And I am conscious, and I kind of want to acknowledge that for some people, however much we might say, it can be done beautifully. And certainly for people that come to me, that come to you, but in particularly in lawyer land that come to me, they often like that I've offered them, a way of thinking that is less combative. But of course, sometimes people do end up in court, and they do end up with exes who absolutely won't budge on a thing. And it is horrible. Those people too will come out the other end, and they also can benefit from being supported during that journey from somebody like you, so that at least whatever they're doing is resonating with their goals and values and their way of being, right?
Absolutely.
But yes, I just kind of do want to acknowledge that, yes, sometimes, much as we would like it to be better, collectively, if there's too much negativity coming from the other side,
it can just not happen. It can be too toxic, but we can always choose how we will respond in that situation.
Exactly. And I think that's what we as a firm do as well, is that we don't write toxic letters. We advocate for our clients, but we show up in a way that is still kind of professional and provides an element of dignity for our clients, because it doesn't have to be, it has to be difficult, but it doesn't have to be kind of nasty, I guess.
Is that why it's important what lawyer you choose? Because the law is the law, but different lawyers have different strategies of execution.
That's exactly right. And, there are certainly some firms that we get a letter and we just know that we're going to be in for nothing less than a battle. because that's the way that they operate. And I've had a really beautiful experience lately where I've met a number of people out in the profession, other lawyers, who have said that they never groan when they get a letter from Umbrella. And I'm really happy about that, because it means that my team are reflecting the values that Eve, my business partner, and I have, and we're doing our jobs, but we're not doing it in a way that is nasty and that kind of makes anybody duck for cover, which I think is good, actually.
Definitely. And the energy you're creating in that entity, I imagine you're probably, continuously attracting, cases that don't get as nasty either. I don't know.
We certainly attract clients that don't get as nasty, but not necessarily cases that don't get as nasty, unfortunately. Because again, as I was saying before, sometimes no matter what you put out, you don't get it back. Yeah. Well, you might have a different view on that, but from a lawyer perspective, that's certainly so.
Yeah. And one final question I want to ask you is, what's the most inspiring day you've had at work?
That's such a great question.
I'm sure there's so many, but
I guess a lot of them are inspiring, yes. But actually, in recent times, I helped this gorgeous, gorgeous man whose ex was not letting him spend any time with his young children. I helped him through that journey, and that was a court process. And he and his new partner and their baby came in to say thank you, and they brought gifts for me and gifts for the staff, and because they'd been so touched by the way that we'd supported them through the journey back to spending time with his kids. And for me, and they were such good people and such a beautiful family. And for me, that was inspiring, not because I got gifts, but because it was so beautiful to see the impact that our team, through not just, yes, issuing court proceedings and coming out the other side, but through providing actual personal care, that it had such a great impact on that family. And to see him moving forward and flourishing with the new partner and the gorgeous new baby, he showed me, he actually brought me a family photo, which sits in pride of place in my office, because helping families is what it's all about, right?
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, it was great. God bless you. If you ever see this, you'll know who you are, and God bless you and your family.
There's so many people who are going to get so much out of today's podcast. I really appreciate your time, Jane. Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful wisdom.
Thank you, Amanda. It's been beautiful to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. Guys, check out umbrellafamilylaw.com.au, and I'll have all of the notes and information of how to find Jane in the blog and in the podcast. And thank you all for listening. And Jane, I'll see you again soon.
See you soon. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bend Like Bamboo podcast. I would love you to rate it and share it with your community or anyone that you think might need to hear this episode. If you would like to discover the power of flexibility and how kinesiology and the Bend Like Bamboo program can help you, please book in for a free discovery call on my website, bendlikebamboo.com, under bookings, or email amanda@bendlikebamboo.com. You can see me one-on-one in Melbourne or on Zoom remotely. My book, Bend Like Bamboo, is now available on my website and bookstores online. And I'm also taking new clients into the 2024 Bend Like Bamboo 6-month program of monthly sessions taking you through all the lessons, tools, and strategies that I detail in the book, helping you to de-stress and reset and to reimagine what can be possible in your mind, body, and life. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, and I will see you at the next session.